Hello and welcome. I'm Kelly Dumar. I'm on the board of the International Women's Writing Guild. I'm so pleased to be here tonight with you and to have all of you here, your readers and you, our listeners, for our bi-monthly IWWG open mic. We meet twice a month. We meet one Sunday night a month at 7 o'clock and one Tuesday, usually afternoon at 2 o'clock. But just a quick note, I hope I don't forget, next Thursday, April 7th, we are having our reading in the evening on Thursday, not at 2 o'clock because our feature couldn't attend at 2 o'clock. So just giving that note out to all of you. I want to thank Katarina Konen from the board of the International Women's Writing Guild, who was here as my collaborator and helper with the open mic. And tonight we are going to open with the reading by poet Frannie Lindsay. And she's going to read for about 15 minutes after I introduce her. And then we're going to have a Q&A. As always, you're welcome to put your questions or comments. We keep our chat room open. We really like to hear from you about what you appreciate about what someone is reading. And if you want to share any background information about your own reading, you're always welcome to do that. But also during Frannie's reading, you may find that there's something that compels you about what she shares. You may find that you have a question that you want to ask her. Please feel free to put that in the chat room. When we have the informal discussion with Frannie afterwards, I'll have a chance to address any of the questions you've put in the chat room. So I do hope that you will. And then we will move after Katarina puts the announcement of the names for tonight's open mic into the chat room. We will then move on to the open mic and we will hear from all of you. And just the reminder, of course, we're 3 minutes. We actually time our 3 minute, I time you. And if you go over your 3 minutes, I actually have to stop you. And you know that I don't like doing that, but I do it. And it doesn't ever mean anything personal. We always want you to come back. We all run over sometimes. So please do your best to practice beforehand. Make sure you're coming in on time. Please don't take it personally if I have to cut you off. And we will look forward to hearing from you again if that's the case. And let's see, I am going to take a quick look at, and I think I've told you everything you need to know for tonight. I'm really excited that we have Frannie Lindsay here to read from her really gorgeous, beautiful book, The Snow's Wife. And if you have it or you've seen the graphic, you see what an actual really beautiful cover she has for this book. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Frannie before I ask her to actually speak. Frannie's 6th volume, The Snow's Wife, was released this fall by Carey Press. Her previous titles are If Mercy, Our Vanishing Mayweed, Lamb, and Where She Always Was. Her honors include the Benjamin Saltman Award, the Washington Prize, the May Swenson Award, and the Missouri Review Prize, as well as fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts and the Massachusetts Cultural Council. Lindsay is widely published in such journals as the Atlantic Monthly, the American Poetry Review, the Yale Review, Field, Plume, the Adroit Journal. It also appears in her poems also appear in the 2014 Best American Poetry Anthology. Frannie teaches workshops on the poetry of grief and trauma at the Cambridge Center for Adult Education. She's a classical pianist. Now, her book, as introduced by Carey Press, The Snow's Wife, presents an unflinching examination of the final months of a marriage ending with a spouse's death. It explores the daily minutiae of caregiving, the tender and the distasteful, that lend startling poignancy and unbearable hardship, how these challenge even the most steadfast bonds between self and God, dismantling that spiritual partnership and recreating a new one that seems at first a temporary refuge, but is later revealed to be sturdy and permanent. Lindsay's poems investigate intimacy on trial in the face of loss. So there are many surprises in here in this book, despite that introduction about grief and elegy and lament. And I may get a chance to mention one of those poems that I found in here, which really surprised me with its humor. But I just want to read this also, this author's note from a poem that is in this collection that was published by the Missouri Review. And this is an author's note from Frannie describing some of the origin of her poem, In November, Everything Departs. And she writes that my husband died after a long illness just over a year ago. The past 12 months seem to have divided themselves not so much into stages of grief, but into depths of comprehending loss and widowhood. I remember the gloomy late afternoon fall walk that inspired In November, Everything Departs. The familiar world of the reservoir where I walk my dog had about it a glimmer of grave but rich loneliness. In the early sunset, each living thing in the natural world seemed utterly separate. I think it was then that I first contemplated widowhood earnestly and without self-pity. The loss presented itself somehow differently, not as a void, but as an open space welcoming my habitation. So as we listen to Frannie tonight, I wonder if we could be listening for those places that are opening inside us into the possibilities of new habitation. And so with that, I welcome Frannie Lindsay.
It's a real pleasure to be here, and thank you all for coming. I'm going to try, this is an experiment. Me reading with my glasses off is a complete experiment, but I'm going to just see how it goes. Thank you so much for that generous introduction, Kelly. I'm overjoyed to be here. I've been looking forward to this reading all month. And I will just say a little bit about this book, not much, since you've given a real good overview of it. It's, I think of these poems not so much as poems of grief as I do of poems of change and poems of intimacy with the self. The way one gets to know oneself during a period of loss. So I'm going to start. I'm not going to talk much between each piece. I'm going to start.
Can I interrupt you, excuse me, for 1 second?
Mhm.
I think we're getting only 2/3 of your face. I'm wondering if you need to adjust your camera. Yeah, slightly, because the top of your head is being cut off.
Oh gosh, I had not.
And that's better. That's better. That's
There
perfect.
we go. Okay.
Sorry
Let
to
me.
interrupt you. I think people are happy they want to see you.
I wouldn't want. No, I don't want. I don't want to appear as scalped. So I'm going to just start. I think. Can you see me okay now?
Ken.
Okay. I'm going to start with the first poem in the book, which is Falcon, and I'm not going to talk very much between pieces. I don't think I really need to. And thank you so much again for being here. Falcon, your body lay alone with its readiness. We shared our bright, harsh peace with the air of the porch, the sun, a gentle stranger. The squirrel you once shooed from the feeder snatched a white crust of her sourdough. We laid our palms down in your sternum's precipice. We rested our hands in your silent white hair, on your ears and your white, unfeeling fingers. We dried the tear that remained on your cheek. We opened the drapes. We opened the cupboards. There were your goblets, the rest of your whiskey. your pocked birthday spoon, clean tea towels folded asleep, and your bathrobe tall on its hallway hook. On the bedside table, water stood in its cup. Your thirst had stopped. The Christmas cactus put forth a blossom. Your King James Bible perched on its chestnut stand like a falcon, wings opened wide to Isaiah. Once I watched a female peregrine swoop on a field mouse. I watched some boys swoop on a muddy red frisbee. Their clean hair glistened. In the white chapel, an amateur choir fumbled an anthem's opening notes. The peregrine came to rest on a birch tree's scarred white arm. It shook with her sudden weight. Some dry leaves fluttered with afterlife. She came for her lonesome feast, her labor of snapping the still moist bones. In the harsh and bright noon's peace, she tore and ate. I've made the slight mistake of dividing these poems with a little tiny sliver of a Post-it note. So the page turning is a little more of a challenge than I had hoped. But anyway, refuge. You didn't have your cane. The dark March wind made you weak. You only had a little way to go. You leaned against a stucco wall I saw once in your travel books. You wanted aspirin. Your scarf was much too tight. Your hat gone. Something more was wrong. You'd lost your wedding ring. I brought a cup of water and 2 pills. I brought them through the snow. I brought a cap that didn't fit. You should have been deep in your shadow's boat, a little bit asleep, a reed between your teeth. The snow, had it been kind, would fall again like old magnolia petals, loosening all at once when it was time, and go on falling, burying your boot tracks. In November, everything departs. Behold the sun draping its already weary cloak over the noontime pond. Behold the peregrine's gaze, clear of rumor, the brambled railroad track at the end of wander. Behold the black dog, watchfully curled around the soup bone she's worried down to its lifeless gleam, the plaid shroud of her blanket. I have been willing the finches to fall silent and join the sullen wet of the leaves, willing my friends to keep out of the way, stars to keep out of the way of the night, clicking along its rainy avenue. But behold, too, the bosomy gloom of libraries, the lamps so earnest and adequate over the little desks. I can bear to look as happiness fades from its tedious season. I can endure each vesper bell tonguing against its brave lip, the thrill in words like reckon, atone, and widow, how they are one another's encrypted siblings, the things they know, the things they hearken. This next poem is a little bit of a departure from the neighborhood of grief and loss. This is a poem called Brushing the Horse. I am tired of praying for a world not ours to break. The hushed hawk sweep, blackly lifting 200 schoolgirls into the breathless Nigerian moonlight. The 14-year-old who has murdered his beautiful algebra teacher for the soft-eyed extinctions. We age in the glare of the news. Give me instead the floor of a barn in the gray of heaven, wet with the scuttle of hand-fed rabbits, their twitch and trust. Give me sparrows' wings scattering hay, the gentle chill of the rafters, the tumbled and redolent towels for carrying peahens back to their safe, dim coops. The hinges arthritic with rust. A cracked bar of soap by the cold water sink. The sun going in like a wife who needs to peel the potatoes. The last truck gone for the day. A plaid shirt draped on a gate. A broom whose bristles flip like the hair of a girl who is ready to go to the Friday dance at the Grange. Give me a roan mare's cheek, the smell of apple of patience. This is a fairly intimate little poem about feeding someone their last meals. It's called Receiving the Host. Bless this oatmeal, this ice cream. Bless shakes, these awful, jammed with calories, thick so you can swallow, thick so you can live a little longer. Bless vanilla, just enough to get the pills down. Bless this little Ovaltine mixed in. Bless every spoon on which your lips still close. This straw that bends so you can live. Oh, bless this syringe, this single liquid dose as needed. Bless this little longer. Golgotha. Then they came and cleansed you, my love, with a separate sponge for each arm, each hand and its citizen fingers, each leg and each foot pale as magnolia, and swept a burst of holy wind through your hair for ease of travel. And then they anointed one of your kerchiefs with tap water and made new your chest and belly and blurred your sex. Then they gathered their competent shadows and turned you and muscled with tender indifference your boulder of pain onto a kinder place and smoothed you and pressed upon your tongue a Eucharist of ice and raised the blinds on the wild and sleeping day. I dedicated this next poem to my husband's daughter, and I really can't call her my stepdaughter because what she became was my best friend. This is called The Rapids of Upland Road, and it's for Lizzie. The Rapids of Upland Road. You are going to lose everything. The funeral home will show up to gather your father beneath a velvet shroud. The red potatoes will sprout in their basket inside the window. Someone will wash and fold the bedding and give it away. The neighbors' visits will stop. The art will assess at barely a fraction, and then you will run out of boxes. The plants will wither. No one will want the rare books. In time, your handwriting too will tie itself into mad tangles. You will never be granted the mercy you pled for. Your hoarse voice will startle you. But look, 2 brown rabbits have popped naively out from behind the lilacs. In their lovely, identical eyes rests the gem of everyday trust. It needs no faceting. Then the evening blinks, although it is nowhere near dark, and leaves you alone with just enough thanks to tear off one more rag. After. No one died in your bed. It is clean today as a plot of daylight. The sheets are new, the pillows nestled like well-nourished children. The packets of square blue swabs for your lips, the folded diapers, the delicate syringes, these were props. Someone prays as the wind grabs bone specks away from her palms. The wind has other blowing to do. Someone cries and the months don't care. Someone tends the plants and they bloom. As if informed, the mail stops. Then God appears as a story, or as the breeze where a story belongs. You died in your bed. We came. We held your face. Summer came too. We had to allow her in. And I'm going to wind up with one new poem. I wrote this last summer. This is called The Best Window. And this is a true story. This was a much loved memory of how my husband would love to listen to music even after he had gone deaf. And anyway, I hope it's self-explanatory. It's called The Best Window. He loved to pretend he could hear the tossed off hosannas of finches and titmice. He even would ask her to open the window nearest the birch and latch the brake on his wheelchair so he faced the sunset he'd learned to imagine, and he would slide his hand deep in the breeze, unbuttoned for him, already wide with the quiet of lilacs, and he would let his hearing aid slip out of place as he settled his buttocks into the cushion he needed now that the tumor pressed on his pelvis, as he smiled and spread his listening like an old, well-traveled blanket over the living room's shelf. And I'm going to end on a somewhat brighter note. This is called November on Fresh Pond. Fresh Pond, for those of you who don't know, the Cambridge area is an actual place where people just love to go walking and looking out at the lake. It's especially beautiful, I think, in the late fall. November on Fresh Pond. But most of all, I have loved afternoons, the color of found pennies, and dogs at home in the worlds of only their names, and the lonely, tall and at peace with their shadows. Everything seems to be holding hands, although it is nothing perhaps but the light with great care joining together the proper ends of things, for in this deep moment there is almost enough touch. And I have loved the sun lowering itself gingerly into the smooth gray water, like an old woman sore from her long good day, taking a last quick swim. I can't thank you enough for coming and listening, and Kelly for hosting this wonderful evening. And I'm honored by your presence. Thank you.
Well, you know, I had this experience, and others may have too, will be interested to hear of, I know we're on Zoom, but I don't feel like we're on Zoom. I feel like we were in a chapel and at a service. They're really such a moving reading. I felt like that would be the setting that I would imagine myself in and listening to these beautiful, beautiful poems, Frannie. There are a number of questions that, and other comments, just appreciating you, but I want to try to get to a couple of the questions by our guests first. Marisa, I know you asked one, and I'm pretty sure I saw it, but I'm looking for it again. Do you want to unmute, Marisa, and ask your question? Or am I putting you on the spot? Marisa, go
Yes.
ahead.
I wanted to ask, you were using imagery from from the news about the children that in Nigeria.
Yes.
How often do you rely, because I've done news, like I've taken headlines and made poems from them. How often do you do that, or do you do that very often?
I did it. I don't do it very often. I did it one other time. Well, I've done it a few other times. I did it a few times with 9/11. I did one poem specifically on the Nigerian schoolgirls, which is in this book.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm confirming that.
Any of, if you wrote
Try.
like political poems or anything like that, due to headlines, but I think
I don't really write political poems,
Okay.
unless I'm deeply moved.
But I forgot to mention, Marisa, sorry, I forgot to mention you are also one of our board members who happens to be here. So now, but I think you're referring to Cry, the other poem
Yes.
about Boko Haram. Yeah. And to me, that seems like a persona poem and a very strong one. So if you get Frannie's book, I do recommend the other poem about Boko Haram and the kidnappings and rapes of the Nigerian women. It's called Cry. And actually, I did have a question relating to that. Thanks so much for your question, Marisa. One of the things that seems to be happening in this book, in the way you construct it, the way you put it together, Frannie, there seem to be pages I would open and almost be a pair of poems that were really speaking to each other. And there's one about a rape, and then this one that seemed to really these pairs of poems seem to really be speaking together. There was I forget the title of the one about the rape, but then there was Cry also right next to it. So was this something you did obviously consciously in terms of putting together your collection? You really—
Oh yes, yeah. Yeah, I paired poems like that with each other because I could see that they were very only tangentially connected to the theme of grief and loss, and in particular this grief and this loss. I wanted to somehow gracefully enough and believably fold them into the story. So I did the best I could with that.
Well, I want to confirm that for you, that they did actually feel like they really belonged there, and to me, to this reader. And there were other pairs that were similar that also had to do with other elements of grief. The farewell blessing paired with angel, or the farewell blessing, and then angel, and then goldfinch. Are those three different poems I'm talking about there?
Yeah.
About a dog, perhaps, or birds, or other animals.
Two dog poems and one about rescuing a mourning dove on the curb.
Yes, the mourning dove on the curb. Yes, really, really powerful poem. And that relates to Leslie is asking in the chat room, the peregrine falcon is a powerful image. Do falcons have a physical presence in your life? And what's your process? Do you free write as part of your daily life and then hone them into your gorgeous elegiac poems?
I wish I could say I honestly have a daily practice. I do not. I try and be home when a poem visits.
Okay, so how do you do that though, Frannie? Can you, I don't know if you can say, how do you be home when a poem visits? And maybe
You,
that's just the impulse to say, I'm going to sit down and
you don't, for me, I can't plan on, I mean, if I was going to be home for a poem to visit, I would just be at home all the time. I would be at my desk all the time. And I'm not. I am not thinking about poetry most of the time, because when it comes, I will be taking out the trash. I will be ironing a shirt. I will be walking the dog. And of course, I don't have a pen. The times when a poem visits are the times when I'm least likely to have something to write with, when I'm swimming.
well, it happened at least enough times to put together this gorgeous collection that you were.
Thank you.
So now, Anna Warwick is here and she is asking, can you talk a bit about your religious imagery, Eucharist, Bible, host, a lot of other things? Have they always been images for you?
They have, to one degree or another. I grew up, I was raised Presbyterian, but that didn't really shape my spiritual life as much as kind of walking through life as a seeker has shaped it. I do have a prayer life. I do have a God. I speak to that God. And so it's not strictly Catholic, or it's not of a denomination, but I am drawn to those symbols and imagery, especially that of Christmas and Easter.
Mm-hmm. And in this book, perhaps, in this book more than others, or?
Yes, because my husband was very devout, and part of our day-to-day ritual was his priest would come and bring the Eucharist for him, and we would both partake of it. And she was there at the end of his life, and she was very, very much a part of his passage out of this life.
And did you know this would be a collection, or how did you know this would be when it was a collection?
You know, I guess I didn't know that I was going to ever write another book. And during the time that my husband was very sick, I didn't write at all. And and this is sort of odd and a little bit poignant, maybe. One night I wrote a poem which happens to be in the book, and he was sitting at the kitchen table, and I said, I've written something. I think I kind of like it, but I can't show it to you because it might upset you. And he said, please, please show it to me. And I did. And he loved it. And it wasn't the first poem in the book sequentially, but it was the first poem it was the first poem I wrote for the book. Mm-hmm. And after that, I didn't stop. Mm-hmm. They just kept coming.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and it sounds like, it sounds like it was a very monumental moment in many ways. Something about mm-hmm. that. It's this permission.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Opening. Yeah. Let's see, Joe Wenner asks, it seems you're very present in every word. Do you reside in this oneness while writing from your memories of being immersed fully, body, mind, and spirit in your living experience?
Yes, I do. That's a good question, and thank you for asking.
Yeah. So that's how we do it, friends. Just reside in our oneness. And that's Betty Pierre says, love that. She loves try to be home when a poem visits, always be prepared for a poem to speak. Yes. Deborah says, I understand not writing during the difficult events because it's hard enough to live it and exhausting to relive it. And Andy asks, had your husband been an audience for your writing all along?
Oh, yes, very much.
Yeah.
My husband was a wonderful poet himself. He, unlike me, he was a formalist. He wrote sonnets almost to the exclusion of everything else. And his sonnets rhymed in iambic pentameter. He not only wrote beautiful sonnets in English, he also translated his sonnets, keeping the rhyme scheme true to itself. He translated them into French. So,
So this
yeah,
was quite a pairing of poets.
it was quite a pairing. Yes, it was. Yeah.
Sipra asks, can you comment on the title of your book? And I wanted to know that too. The origin of the title, The Snow's Wife. What she wants to know what is meant by snow. Or I'm curious about where the inspiration for that title. I mean, you mentioned snow. Snow is definitely a theme that runs throughout the book.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know the title would be The Snow's Wife?
I did not. It came to me just sort of as a swoop. And I thought, that's the title of my book. And I didn't have any question about it. And the reason I think this title came zipping into the room was I was looking for something. I was looking for a way to capture the temporal, to capture the that which does not last, and yet also to capture the eternal. So it just felt, and it felt like with the loss, I was still very much a wife.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, beautiful. One last question I want to ask has to do with mentioning that you lead these grief groups and they're writing groups. And I wondered if you wanted to just talk about what you do in those groups a little bit. And I'm curious about how long you've been doing them, because I have a sense it goes back further than, I mean, it's began much before your own experience with this grief in terms of the loss of
Yeah,
your husband.
yeah. I started teaching this group in, I think it was the summer of 2016, or was it the spring, or 15. And it's always been a small group. Well, small, if you think of 12 students as small, actually it's not small at all. But what I mean by small is that these people, even when new people come in, they really, really get to know each other, and they get to respect one another through their work and their process. And it's absolutely not a support group. It's a group that focuses on craft. And if we didn't do that, it would not be a poetry workshop. We would not survive as a poetry workshop. But because people are insistent on that, it really, really works as a poetry group. And so I have the same, right now I've got the same core group of people who keep coming back, and it's a real joy to see them time and time again. And the workshop is never the same. And I see several of my students, former students and current students, are here tonight, and that's just hello. It's good to see you. Nice to see familiar faces. Yeah.
We're very glad that you are here. Andy asked, does the group have a name?
Nope, it's just the Poetry of Grief and Trauma. It meets at the Cambridge Center for Adult Education,
Which is in Massachusetts, and we have people from all over the country, perhaps
yeah.
even from the world tonight.
It's in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Um,
And
if-
of
Go
course,
ahead.
on Zoom, it's potentially all over the world.
So I have put, Frannie, your website in the chat room. I've also put the mention of where to purchase Cabin Carry Press, the book, The Snow's Wife, and also the coupon that you should use when you're ordering it. It's Lindsay with a capital Lindsay, Lindsay. But so if people want to contact you, is there a way from your website, Frannie, for them to contact you?
Yes. If you press contact me, I think it will guide you to my email. I'm pretty sure there may actually be a window with fields where you put in your email address in the message. I'm not sure. I haven't been to the website for a little while myself.
Okay, well,
But yes, you can contact me through my website.
Okay, excellent. And I will be putting the link in again into the chat room. Well, we're just honored and really so pleased. And I can't thank you
Thank you
enough
so
for this
much.
reading. And please stick around. We've got some others here tonight in our open mic. And I'm going to actually stop the recording right now.